Dear meaty Little Women fans, welcome to the second season of Small Umbrella in the Rain. I am very happy and excited about this season. There will be new episodes every Thursday for the next 12 weeks. Today's comment shoutout goes to Melody. This is what she says. I wish, instead of remaking Little Women into a story where Jo is happy as a spinster, they'd give us a movie about Louisa May Alcott and Henry Thoreau. I want to see that story. Maybe folks would understand that Friedrich was the real prize then. And maybe they could understand better that Louisa did not remain unmarried because she wished it. She needed meeting of the minds, mutual respect, sort of love. It is my experience that Jo and Laurie shippers are usually folks who haven't read the book. Or if they had, it was when they were very young, and it was still only as a companion to the 1994 movie. I love your comparison to The Notebook. I am always horrified when I hear that it is someone's idea of romantic. It's so toxic. And Jo and Laurie together would be just that. I think one of the beautiful things about Little Women, it shows the difference between immature and mature love. When we are young, love often looks like what Jo and Laurie had. I think Laurie just wanted to be in love, so he latched onto the idea of Jo. It's hard to see it this way, though, because of the movie portrayal. How do you say no to a young and beautiful Christian Bale? I think we can say the same about Timothée Chalamet in the 2019 film and Peter Lawford in the 1949 film. And I agree 100%. Perhaps the problem is not the way the book is written, but that society at large romanticizes that type of toxic behavior. Louisa found Henry very attractive, even though he wasn't considered conventionally attractive. But it wasn't just about his looks, but the connection that they shared. Laddie Wisniewski, who was one of the real-life Lauries, he was conventionally good-looking man, but he and Louisa, they did not share that connection. Romanticizing possessive behavior in a male character runs very deeply in our culture. There are double standards, because when a man is pursuing the woman, no matter what the woman says, a lot of people think it's romantic, but when a woman does the same to a man, she is automatically labeled as crazy. This episode is about the similarities between Goethe's novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, and Laurie's character arc in Little Women, and especially how Jo's and Laurie's relationship can be directly traced into Goethe's novel. There will be mentions of suicides. If this is a topic that triggers you, use your own judgment how to proceed. It is not going to be overly explicit, but it can be a difficult topic for some people. This episode is sponsored by Audible. If you wish to find unlimited amount of books to read and podcasts to listen, you can get 1 month free trial by clicking the affiliate link in the description. And if you are looking to something to listen on Audible, I can recommend The Sorrows of Young Werther and other Goethe's novels. To me, in terms of my character research, reading Goethe helped me to understand Laurie's character a lot more, and also it made me understand the transcendentalist worldview and their belief system better, because Goethe was one of their heroes, and they believed that nature was the manifestation of God, and this is an idea that Goethe writes a lot in his novels, and because he was Louisa's favorite writer as well, it has helped me to understand Louisa more as a person. This is Small Umbrella in the Rain, the Little Woman podcast, Laurie and Werther romanticizing the path to self-destruction. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was one of the most praised German authors of his time. Louisa May Alcott was a big Goethe fan. Louisa was a transcendentalist. The whole worldview of the transcendentalist could be described as nature-centric form of Christianity, and it was based on German philosophy and German Romanticism. Goethe was one of the most important literal inspirations for the transcendentalist because he captured the essence of their belief into poetic form. Louisa, according to her own words, grew up hearing stories of Goethe on her father's knee. Bronson Alcott's library included contemporary translation of Goethe's biography, and we can assume that it was one of the first books that Louisa read. One of Louisa's most famous literal characters, Laurie from Little Women, is partially based on Goethe and Goethe's literal heroes. Goethe was born into great wealth. His father was a doctor of jurisprudence and came from a prestigious family from Frankfurt. Goethe was homeschooled. He had tutors and he studied history, mathematics, music, languages, dancing and fencing. Goethe was fluent in French, a language he spoke as well as his native German. At the age of 16, Goethe began to study law in the University of Leipzig, but he mostly focused on deepening his love for literature and partying. After graduating as the licentiate of law in 1771, Goethe worked as a lawyer in Frankfurt for a while. Around the same time, he began to receive more fame as an author. Goethe published his first novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, at the age of 24, and it became a massive bestseller. At the time, Werther was the second most sought book in Germany. Goethe was one of the most prominent figures of the German Sturm und Drang movement. Sturm und Drang refers into deep emotional stress. The name of the movement originates from a play called Sturm und Drang, written by Friedrich Maximilian von Klinger. Two most prominent figures of the movement were Goethe and Friedrich Schiller, and the movement affected the German art world, music, literature and theatre. Louisa described herself as a creature of moods. So finding an author who managed to capture Louisa's own emotional stress into words must have been both exciting and comforting. In Little Woman, Laurie, Jo and Friedrich can be described as Goethean characters. Laurie notably the most. We can trace Laurie's character arc in Little Woman to two Goethe's novels, Sorrows of Young Werther and Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship, and to Goethe himself. In Little Woman, Laurie is born into great wealth. He lives with his grandfather and he has a home tutor, Mr. Brooke. In boarding school, he also studied fencing and dancing. In college, Laurie is a party boy and not very interested in the world of academics, unlike Jo. Laurie is also fluent in French. He has, most of the time, nice manners and he is a talented musician. Book Laurie is sensitive but very immature and sometimes quite chauvinistic. Laurie is very temperamental. He was born out of a forbidden marriage between his American father and Italian mother, and this is one of the reasons why he struggles to bond with his grandfather, and they both feel a great deal of resentment towards one another when Laurie moves to live with him. Sorrows of Young Werther is a novel written in a letter form. This is an important fact because this makes an immediate effect to the reader. There is no narrator. Letters are written by Werther and addressed to his friend Wilhelm. Werther is a story of a young man who falls in love to Charlotta, Lottie, who is engaged to another worthy man, Albert. Werther suffers from constant emotional stress and he also has quite a temper. In the beginning of the novel, Werther travels to the countryside. He is impressed by the unpretentious country people and he envies their happy and simple lifestyle. Often he wonders what is the secret of their happiness, since they have way less than he has. Werther spends a great deal of time thinking the meaning of life, and he is a great admirer of beauty and the natural world. He spends his time writing and drawing the things he sees. Nature comforts him, and that is where he feels happy and safe. When Werther meets Lottie for the first time, he is invited to her home and he sees her feeding her younger sisters and brothers. And what Werther is attracted is the feeling of warmth and home that he sees around him, something that he didn't seem to have in his own urban home. Same happens in Little Woman. When Laurie meets the March family for the first time, Jo sees, quote, hungry look in his eyes when he looks at her family. Louisa's younger sister May was a talented professional artist, but perhaps Louisa was also inspired by Werther's artistic talents. Quote, I am so happy, my dear friend, so absorbed in the exquisite sense of mere tranquil existence that I neglect my talents. I should be incapable of drawing a single stroke at the present moment, and yet I feel that I never was a greater artist than now. When wild lovely valley teems with vapor around me, and the meridian sun strikes the upper surface of the impenetrable foliage of my trees, and but a few stray gleams steal into the inner sanctuary, I throw myself down among the tall grass by the trickling stream, and as I lie close to the earth, 1,000 unknown plants are noticed by me. When I hear the buzz of the little world among the stalks, and grow familiar with the countless indescribable forms of the insects and flies, then I feel the presence of the Almighty, who formed us in his own image, and the breath of that universal love which bears and sustains us, as it floats around us in an eternity of bliss. And then, my friend, when darkness overspreads my eyes, and heaven and earth seem to dwell in my soul and absorb its power, like the form of a beloved mistress, then I often think with longing, oh, would I could describe these conceptions, could impress upon paper all that is living, so full and warm within me, that it might be the mirror of my soul, as my soul is the mirror of the infinite God, oh my friend, but it is too much for my strength. I sink under the weight of the splendor of these visions. Friedrich is also in the source of young Werther. Quote, the other day I went to the fountain and found a young servant girl who had set her pitcher on the lowest step and looked around to see if one of her companions was approaching to place it on her head. I ran down and looked at her. Shall I help you, pretty lass? Said I. She blushed deeply. Oh, sir, she exclaimed. No ceremony, I replied. She adjusted her headgear, and I helped her. She thanked me and ascended the steps. In Little Woman, when Joe sees Friedrich for the first time, he is helping a poor servant girl to carry heavy hold of coal. Friedrich's kind nature is one of the things that Joe is very attracted to. Werther's body type is more similar to Friedrich than Laurie. Laurie is described to be a skinny and androgynous young man. Werther, on the other hand, is tall, solidly built man with broad shoulders. He has blue eyes and a fine forehead, similar to the way Friedrich is described to look in Little Woman. Louisa was attracted to very masculine-looking Teutonic heroes, and all her romantic interest in her novels, they do look like Werther. In Little Woman, Joe and Friedrich have a very strong flirt game, and it's often connected to coffee. When Friedrich comes to court Joe tells to Hannah to make coffee because, quote, Friedrich, Professor Bear, doesn't like tea. Joe would love to make German foods for Fritz, but she's not a great cook, and she's sad about that. But Friedrich, he constantly praises Joe how she makes the best coffee. They are adorable. Werther never fails to mention Wilhelm how much he enjoys drinking coffee with his new acquaintances, and he writes these long descriptions how they all went to picnic and drank lots of coffee. Coffee is mentioned at least 10 times. I am beginning to feel that these Goethean novels were Louisa's early travel guides to Germany, and she did visit Germany on her first trip to Europe, only surpassed by the German Bible. The novel is entirely written from Werther's perspective, so the reader does not get to hear Lottie's personal thoughts or feelings about him and his behavior. Werther falls in love, but Lottie does not return to his feelings. Albert is described as a man who Werther respects, but also envies. There is an element of ridiculousness in Werther's behavior and his emotional stress. He compares his mood changes into dark clouds and thunderstorms. Both Werther and Laurie are written to be overly dramatic characters at times. Werther's mentions and thoughts of suicide appear alarmingly often. Albert is worried when Werther jokes about it, and when Werther defends his man taking his own life, when the constant passions and feelings are never ending and he can't escape them. Laurie's and Werther's emotional stress is not caused by the broken heart. Their problems are caused by the lack of meaning. Laurie was always told what to do by others. He was addicted to Joe's maternal care, and because of that maternal care that Joe has for him, she was never able to inspire him to become a person who could make his own decisions and live his own life. Part of this is created by Joe's sympathy to the masculine. She struggles to judge his behavior because she has a soft spot for boys. We can trace this back to all the real-life Lauries being a lot younger than Louisa. In the middle of the novel, Werther leaves Lottie and Albert and travels away. He gets a position as an ambassador's assistant, but the work does not satisfy him, or the duties that comes with it. He struggles to fit into the high society because he feels that his individuality is being smothered by the fake facade. He compares his wealthy associates to the poor people who were so kind to him. Werther sees that the nature of the person does not matter in the society, but only wealth and status does, which leads into inevitable conflict with the aristocrats, and as a result he is reminded by his supporters that on such occasions, going with the whim of the society is the way to go. Werther's behavior becomes the topic of the gossip among those who have envied his position, and Werther is so upset he would like to, quote, stab a knife into his heart. Goethe lived during the time when neo-humanism became mainstream philosophy. One of the more important aspects of neo-humanism was the idea of self. What is more important, the sense of self, the personal values and the moral codes, or in the end, is our value only measured by our wealth and status? The idea of being one, authentic self, was part of the transcendentalist philosophy. Werther's inner struggles with his self-worth being measured by things that he has no control over, like his family background, is reprised in Little Woman when Jo and Fredrik participate into the social gathering of artists, poets and intellectuals. Jo has a moment of clarity when the people who she has been admiring from afar show the true nature of themselves, and it is far from flattering. This becomes a pinning point between her and Fredrik because his speech on religion goes right into her soul. Jo often despised the higher class gatherings and was even afraid to be invited into such events. This is caused by Jo's preconceptions about the higher class, but also her unique sense of self and the way her parents have shown her the living conditions of the less fortunate. The idea of self and self-worth appears in Jo's and Fredrik's discussion about writing, and when he reminds Jo that if she, Jo, wants to be a successful writer, first she needs to find her own voice, and as a result Jo begins to search her own style. This is where Werther and Larry separate. Despite the fact that Larry has grown up in the world that was filled with these high-class social gatherings, he is not against them. In fact, he enjoys participating to parties and dinners. Amy has always enjoyed such gatherings. Larry grew up in that world, so he does not have any disillusions about it. But it is only with his relationship with Amy he begins to understand the privileges of his own position. This is a quote from Liisa Saariluoma, professor of literature. Even before Werther falls in love to Lottie, he knew that their love was doomed because she was engaged. For Werther, being unhappily in love was something that he was pursuing from the beginning. Falling in love with Lottie was a self-destroying path from the start, because Werther knew that even love cannot save him from a life without meaning. Everything that Lottie represents to Werther, the warm atmosphere, the sense of home, or memories from his childhood and his first love, is secondary compared to his addiction for the emotional stress. Lottie cannot save him from the conditions that he must live or that he refuses to find a meaning for his life, and instead he makes Lottie the only reason for his living, and their relationship changes from friendship to emotional blackmailing. Werther's love for Lottie is the same love he feels when he is with children or the peasants, because they erect something inside him, harmony, which is not something he has been able to find from the high society. When Werther returns to Lottie and Albert, they are now a married couple. They treat Werther with friendliness, but his moods are uncontrollable. He knew that the marriage was about to happen, but it only fuels to his distress. The country idyll and the harmony that he was so in love with is utterly broken. Young women who he was friends with had lost their child, and her husband had returned and lost their inheritance. A young peasant boy, a friend of Werther, had sexually abused his mistress. Even nature does not comfort Werther. Seeing the hazel trees he had admired with Lottie make him furious. Lottie becomes angry at Werther, accusing him for choosing her from all the other women, when he knew that she was engaged to somebody else. She and Albert try to calm him down, and she tries to figure out how they could make him to be more sensible. This is a quote from Little Woman. "I can't love anyone else. I can't forget you, Joe. Never. What shall I do with him? Sighed Joe, finding that emotions were more unmanageable than she expected. You haven't heard what I wanted to tell you. Sit down and listen, for indeed I want to do right and make you happy, she said, hoping to soothe him with a little reason, which proved that she knew nothing about love. When Werther has made his final decision, Lottie is very nervous when she goes to meet him. In Little Woman, when Joe decides that it is time to tell Larry to stop, she is very nervous. Werther reads Lottie Death of Ossian, which is a poem by James McPherson, and all the passages handle death and grief, and they are very sentimental. Werther becomes very abusive. Everything passes away, but a whole eternity could not extinguish the living flame. She is mine. Yes, Charlotta, you're mine forever. Werther doesn't listen anything that Lottie says, and then he shoots himself. This is what Larry says. Don't tell me that, Joe. I can't bear it now. That you love that old man, that devilish professor you were always writing about. If you say you love him, I know I shall do something desperate.
I don't think I'll ever marry.
Oh, yes you will. Yes, you will. You'll meet some good-for-nothing, no-account idiot, and you'll fall in love with him and work and live and die for him. I know you will. It's your way. And I'll have to stand by and see it? Well, I'll be hanged if I do.
Laurie, where are you going?
To the devil! I hope you'll be sorry.
Laurie, please.
When Larry says that, there comes a time when Joe will find someone else, and that he rather dies than sees it. This is Joe's brilliant response, which I must say is never in Little Woman movies. Yes, I will live and die for him, if he ever comes and makes me love him, in spite of myself, and you must do the best you can. I've done my best, but you won't be reasonable, and it's selfish of you to keep teasing me for what I can't give. I shall always be fond of you, very fond indeed, as a friend, but I'll never marry you, and the sooner you believe it, the better for the both of us. In Little Woman, Jo actively tries to partner Laurie to each one of her sisters, because she earnestly wants Laurie to be her brother. First with Meg because she is in the age, and in part 2, first to Beth and later to Amy, even before Jo knew that Amy and Laurie were rekindling their friendship in Europe. For the modern viewer, Jo's desire to marry Laurie to any one of her sisters might come out as fear of commitment, but the real reason is actually what Louisa writes in the proposal chapter. Jo at that point did not know yet what love was, but she knew that she was not in love with Laurie, and that she wanted to be with someone who she could love truly and with her whole heart. Throughout the book series, Jo is shown as a maternal figure who saves young boys from being lost, and in Jo's eyes, without her family's care, Laurie will be lost. Both Werther and Little Woman flip the pattern of the traditional romance novel because the female protagonist wants someone better, a partner who is more suitable for them than the overly emotional guy who is pursuing them and whose advances make them feel uncomfortable. Werther was a massively popular book among the German youth when it appeared. Young men even dressed like Werther, wearing a yellow vest and a blue jacket, and it inspired thousands of young men and women to commit suicide. And many were angry at Lottie for rejecting Werther. Does this sound familiar to Little Woman fans? Werther's way to self-destruction is pervasive and all-compassing. His desire to live fulfilling, meaningful, inspirational life is replaced with the belief that it cannot be possible. Werther's inner conflicts have been often explained with his status, that his unhappiness is caused by the fact that he cannot live a simpler life because he was born as an aristocrat. More contemporary interpretation is that Werther sees no meaning in his life. In his biography, Goethe writes about his inspirations for Werther, that the boredom towards life troubled his generation, and the popular literature of the time was all about death and disappearance. Emily and I discussed about this in our Laurie episode. It is a shame that Laurie's character arc is missing from every Little Woman adaptations, because the lack of meaning and not really knowing what you want to be or what you want to do with your life, that is a topic that a lot of young people still today can identify with. In A Little Woman, when the reader moves from part 1 to part 2, All the sisters have grown, but Laurie has stayed in the mental level of a teenager. He doesn't like school. He doesn't like to work. Joe has become quite tired with his behavior. She's always telling him how to act and how to behave. There are scenes in Little Woman where Laurie is frustrated to the way Joe is criticizing him, but he still continues to pursue her, even when he knows that Joe finds it annoying. Laurie is on a self-destructing path. For Werther and Laurie, Joe/Lottie represents Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Manic Pixie Dream Girl is a character that somehow is expected to give the male protagonist whatever he needs to complete them, and that love erases their troubles, so they don't need to grow or change. But neither Joe or Lottie are Manic Pixie Dream Girls. Quite the contrary, they are individuals with their own desires and needs. Laurie first tries to kiss Joe when they are 15, and it happens when Beth becomes ill, and Joe says no. His advances become more aggressive in Little Woman Part 2, which takes place 4 years later, and Joe starts to be afraid hanging out alone with him, which is why she travels to New York, where she meets Professor Bhaer, and she begins to develop feelings for him, and he to her. But unlike Laurie, Friedrich respects Joe, and he wants to know her true feelings for him before making any kinds of advances. When Laurie proposes to Joe, he threatens to kill himself if she says no. One of the best films of the recent years that depicts Wertherian behavior is 500 Days of Summer. The entire visual narration of the movie is based on the emotional landscape of Tom, the protagonist. Tom is in love with the idea of love, more than Summer, the woman who he is dating. There's a scene in the movie where Summer, for the first time, shows vulnerability around Tom and shares something deeply personal from her past. But her entire speech is mumbled, so the viewer doesn't know what she's saying, and the only words that Tom hears are, "I haven't told this to anyone before." Tom hears the one thing he wants to hear. This is what Joseph Gordon-Levitt said about his character, Tom. He develops a mildly delusional obsession over a girl onto whom he projects all these fantasies. He thinks she'll give his life meaning because he doesn't care about much else going on in his life. A lot of boys and girls think their lives will have meaning if they find a partner who wants nothing else in life but them. That is not healthy. That's falling in love with the idea of a person, not the actual person. After being rejected by Joe, Laurie travels to Vienna, and there he tries to compose an opera for Joe. But no matter how hard he tries, she never fits into the role of a sweet princess his mind wants to conjure. This has never been adapted in the Little Woman films. This is why Laurie's and Joe's relationship was doomed from the beginning. Laurie doesn't see women as who they are. He falls in love with fantasy. He projected his fantasies and expectations onto Joe. He ignores the signs and warnings and wants to live in his fantasy world. He tries to see Joe as a princess who he is going to save, but all things that he remembers are the most unflattering aspects of Joe. Since he is Joe's best friend, he should know what kind of person Joe is. This is also when Laurie begins to dream about a woman who looks a lot like Amy, and that is when he remembers the thing that Amy told him, that he is lazy and that she is ashamed of him. This is a huge turning point for Laurie. He leaves the daydreams and goes to find a work from his grandfather. Is Amy a manic pixie girl? No, she isn't, because Laurie sees Amy's full reality, and Manic Pixie Dream Girl is never a real person. It is a male fantasy. Quote from Sarah Colvin, professor of German. Sorrows of Young Werther brought Goethe enormous fame. It was hugely successful. There are elements of Sturm und Drang in it, but more than that, it tapped into the cultural sensibility of the time, the importance of the heart, the importance of the emotions. An enormous audience responded into that, so that very quickly it was popular for all kinds of reasons, partly because you could decode it, and people always loved that. Goethe, he himself fell in love to a young woman called Charlotte von Buff, and the main character that Werther falls in love is called Lottie. That brought some embarrassment to the real-life Charlotta and her fiancé. In reality, the relationship between Charlotta and Goethe was platonic, and he had a great respect for Johann Christian Kestner, who was the Albert of the story. Werther, he kills himself in the end, and a lot of young men and women followed his example. Werther was badly misunderstood as a novel. Firstly, because people didn't understand that Goethe was actually criticizing the cultural sensibility in the character of Werther, and secondly, it was read as an encouragement to suicide, which it certainly wasn't. It was partly based onto a young man called Jerusalem, whose story Goethe had heard and implemented to the novel. Jerusalem was a promising young ambassador's assistant who had had heartbreaks and disappointments living in the high society and who eventually took his own life. Goethe was horrified by the wave of suicides that happened. A couple of years later, he literally rewrote Werther, this time in more critical tone. Louisa was a consumer of Goethe's novel since an early age. Because she had read Goethe's biography, she seemed to have a very deep understanding why Werther was not a character to be romanticized, but just like Goethe. Louisa noticed that giving Laurie this Wertherian character arc in the end took the attention away almost everything else in the novel. I think we can all agree with this. It is difficult for us to understand it now, but when Little Women appeared, Louisa received tons of mail every day from young girls asking her to rewrite the ending of the novel and marry Joe to Laurie. There is a scene in Joe's Boys, which is the last Little Woman book, where Joe, who is now a famous writer, is very frustrated by these fans who send these requests, and the fans who come to spy on her and leave disappointed when they see that she is a grey woman in her 50s and not a pretty 15-year-old. This is what Elizabeth Bancroft writes in her essay, Al Got Through 30 Years, Letters to Alf Whitman. Alfred, a motherless lonely boy of 15, enrolled in Franklin B. Private School in 1857. The shy youth became a great favorite of the Alcott girls. 13 years later, after Louisa's death, Alfred published portions of 12 of her letters to him in the Ladies' Home Journal, permitting the magazine to announce that Laurie, the beloved quote-unquote hero of Little Women, had edited them. Apparently, up to then, it had been generally believed that Ladislas Wisniewski of Vevey and Paris was the sole prototype for Laurie, but Alfred admitted that Louisa has written him many years before that, quote, Laurie is you, and gently, that's Ladislas, you are the sober half, and Ladislas, who I met abroad, is the gay whirligig half. I'm not a native English speaker, so I had to check what whirligig means. Whirligig is a toy that spins around, for example, a top or windmill. I think I also need to add that the word gay in the 19th century context wasn't about sexual orientation. It meant a person who took care of their looks and looked dashing and dandy. Louisa met young Wisniewski in Switzerland. He was very flirtatious with Louisa, who nursed him when he was ill, if he was ill. Louisa always spoke very highly about Ladislas in public, but in private letters between Louisa and her sister May, they call him boring, and they were frustrated that he didn't take life very seriously. This is also why I am always very skeptical about any of Louisa's public statements. She didn't want anyone to know how heavily Little Woman was intertwined with her own life. We can only imagine Louisa's frustration when her young fans would beg her to marry Joe to Laurie, who was based on dear friend like Alf, or Ladislas, who was somewhat Louisa's ex. I can see why Werther was such a beloved character among young people in the 18th century, because he is written to be a very endearing with all his messiness and all his flaws. Both Laurie and Werther have these tragic elements within them that appeal to young people. Thank you for listening. You can also find Little Woman channel on Instagram and on YouTube, and we are also on Facebook TV. I'll see you soon. Make good choices.